Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Joanne Richards. And Joanne, you with me?
Yes.
All right. Well, where were we? We were talking about who protects the gates. I mean, who's there doing his job now that he's not around?
I wish I knew. I don't know, because he swears to me that the International Security Agency that his dad and Admiral Nimitz had run, because his dad is dead, it's defunct. So I'm hoping that there are other individuals out there. I hope there's some kind of agency out there that is pulling together, because what was unique about that agency is that when publicly the world was at the Cold War with each other, when there was a common threat to all the, when there was a common threat to all the countries on the earth, the military pulled together, pulled in people, and it was a small, like a couple hundred people at a time. They would pull together and deal with the threat, whether it was off planet or on planet. And it wasn't always dealing with aliens either, different things. And we usually just talk about the alien stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that there's still, because I don't think the Deep Space Fleet went away. So I'm assuming and I'm hoping that somebody is still in control. I also know, on a good note, that, like I said, I know the Raptors are helping protect the planet. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing, because they love this planet probably more than we do. And I don't know what other species are out there helping, especially like in a military way, helping to defend the planet. But I do strongly believe that there's a few other species out there who are doing so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. So what about, what are the other off-world threats you mentioned other than aliens? What would we be looking at?
No, I mean, aliens, or besides things threatening to just crash into Earth. I mean, sometimes, some of the missions he was on had to do with drug interdiction and, drug trafficking, and it was probably because the CIA was doing it, I don't know a lot about that. I've only, read one like an excerpt of something he wrote, and it had something to do with, he wasn't drug trafficking, and I think it was more of drug interdiction or, for lack of a better term, spying to see who was involved with certain drug things, mm-hmm. Drug trafficking. But so sometimes, because I know he said, they always knew what the Bushes were doing, they just couldn't touch them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of these people are like
when
that.
The drugs were coming in and whatever, that they were never allowed to touch the Bushes. But they knew exactly what they were doing. So, it's just most of the stuff he concentrates now is all these alien-related missions. And some of it is military, but some of it is just cool history, which, again, is fascinating to me because, the one thing that I'm promoting a lot lately is the report he's doing about the Iran. There was an Interstellar Treaty Conference in 1971 in Iran, and I did a talk several years back about the one in 1961 that was held in England, and he was there as a little boy. And in 1971, he was there as a young adult working security. Mm. So again, now he's an adult. He's in the military. It's like right before he went to Vietnam, and he's there as security. And so publicly, they're celebrating. The huge celebration is for the Shah's birthday, I believe, and privately, it's a great cover for an interstellar treaty conference. And you had species coming from all over, and coming and arriving through the portal at Stonehenge, for example. Some of the different species arrived that way, and I don't know how everybody arrived. And I learned about a lot of different species just from starting to read that one. I know that Contessa leonis, the cat species, they were there. There's a war beetle, there's a giant beetle species that were there, and just lots of. And at the same time, then all this history, because his report doesn't just talk about the conference. It's like weeks before that, it's like who who they were making preparations for different species to arrive, so all the logistics involved with that, and then different kidnap attempts and sabotage attempts, and so it's never just about the adventure or the 1 week of the conference or the few days of the conference, but because he hasn't even finished that part. He's finished the first 2 parts, and each are over 1,000 pages.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I can burn it on the CD because I'm not printing that out for anybody. You can print out your own 1,000 pages.
Yeah,
but
really.
I either burn it on a CD, or once I get paid for it, I'm sending the link to it for Dropbox, and then they can have the PDF and print it or just read it online, however they want it.
That's great.
But so I have 2 parts for that so far, and it's fascinating.
Oh, it sounds very interesting. Well, what's interesting is it's like not all is as it appears. We have the linear illusion of this is what's going on, and this space-time configuration and the illusion of, and then you have something else completely opposite, like in an alternate reality and universe, which is actually another parallel. It's really wild. And when you mentioned Stonehenge, like there's a portal arrival at Stonehenge. Now, how would people not notice that? That's my question.
That's a good question. Probably because back in the 70s, well, I don't know if it happened at night or if it happened in broad daylight. I would have to read a little more carefully.
Yeah, I'm going to have to.
There's one thing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read it. When you get it ready, let me know. I want a copy.
Oh, yeah. Well, the first 2, like I said, the first 2 parts are ready, and I think this arrival's probably in part 1 or the beginning of part 2. But what's fascinating is because you have witches there and you have raptor females there, and they're all waiting. I don't know who's supposed to be arriving. I don't know if it's more raptors or if it's a different species, but they're all very excited. And, all of a sudden the dimensional gate opens up there, and whoever it is arrives. So I haven't read. I don't know who's arriving, but it's fascinating. And the cooperation between the human witches and the raptor witches and the raptor females, it's just fascinating. So you get all these insights into just the relationships, the interspecies relationships, and the knowledge that these different groups have, and how we were working together to help further along the groups that were coming and going to go to the conference. And and the kind of the funny side aside from all that is like, well, where do you house them? Because not all the females and their children were going to go over to the conference. They were going to stay in England, and they had to move them from maybe one manor house to another because they were so destructive. And they don't mean to be. It's just they're big and they have tails and they have sharp claws, and they unintentionally destroy furniture and break things, and they would have to move them probably more than once. But just the logistics of putting up a species. But again, back then, it's like you didn't have as much public around, and you could close off a place, and you could probably close off Stonehenge. So again, I don't know what time of day it happened, but you could keep the public away if you have to. And a lot of these manor houses are places where the raptors, for example, would stay. The military and I guess it was the RAF, they would just close down a place and keep tourists out.
Yeah, well, nowadays, of course, we have the iPhone nowadays, so it's hard to, be discreet. But back then, you could probably do a little bit more. It's very interesting. Have you been to Stonehenge?
Well, I was in England a year ago, just right about this time, and I got kind of close to it. My friend that was driving, we didn't want to pay to go into the parking lot because you still can't get very close to Stonehenge now. But so we went on a side road that is like at the edge of the field. So there's a fence there so we could look at it and take pictures. And then as we got back on the motorway, because she was taking me, I was flying out the next day. So as we're driving towards the airport area, you get to see it a little closer. Now, if I had been around some of Mark's children, I could have probably gotten really close to it.
Mm-hmm. So they have it roped off? Because I thought that anybody could go over to Stonehenge, right?
You can go there. You just can't get really close and touch the stones.
Are you serious? Oh, I thought you could.
Oh, yeah, no, not unless you're with now, I think Obama got to get up close and personal with the stones.
Yeah,
he was over there recently. Yeah, I know. Don't let him touch them. I think if you're with a special group or with certain people who might have certain abilities, they're allowed to go next to the stones, but the general public cannot go up and just touch the stones anymore. No.
That's unfortunate. Well, there's such a powerful frequency associated with the stone.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Wow, that's too bad. That's really too bad.
Cool. Now, on the other hand, like the first time I went to England in 2007, Mark said, in the Cotswolds, there's this lovely ring of stones, and they weren't standing stones; they were all boulders, but it was a ring, and definitely a place where I'm sure aliens have come, and definitely the witches still use it, and very powerful, lovely energy there. And you walk around and find the stone that resonates with your energy, and that is so cool. It's like, woo!
Yeah, that's nice.
So I found mine.
Cool.
So it doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and where was the other place I was at? I think it was when I was in Ireland. My second trip over there, you go out in this. It's not a desolate-looking place, but a very rocky section of Ireland. It's called the Burren, and a lot of shrines or burial areas. Or, they would have an area where maybe they would bring the cremated remains, or they would have rituals or whatever. And it was just maybe like an archway of two standing stones and then the thing over it. But, wonderful energy at those places. Mm-hmm. And, they're just off by the side of the road.
Oh, yeah, Ireland's a magical place to begin with.
Yeah.
That whole area is incredible, yeah. Yeah, it's almost sad, though, how they try to stop people from connecting in with what is our celestial heritage. I find that infuriating.
Yeah.
Think about it.
And, but again, and I don't know whether just too many people being up close and personal with the Stonehenge stones was damaging them, or, I don't know if people were trying to take pieces. I don't know why they decided to pull the tourists back from getting right up there.
Yeah, it's possible they were pulling something like that. You never know, but still, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, you can open up gateways through consciousness anyway. I mean, you really don't have to be in these, physical locations. We all know that. But it's nice to go there and travel, without a doubt. So let me ask you something about the just to go back into the Philadelphia experiment for a minute here. When they the survivors, how did they adapt to the regular timeline without cellular trauma or more phasing? Do you know? Have you heard anything about that?
Oh, that's a good question. No.
Okay.
How did they adapt?
I was curious about that insofar as what happened to the people that went through the testing, because you said they tested more than 2 times, right?
Well, I know the one right from the docs, the 2 famous times that we hear about. And then Mark hasn't talked a lot about the time when FDR was on the ship and they had to phase it out. But yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because I have heard stories that some of the officers did start to phase shift after they left. That was the residual effect of their bodies. So I was curious insofar as what happened. And
so, like after it happened, they could at other times phase in and out?
Well, they started to phase. Yeah, they would start to phase. Their whole cellular structure was starting to change in frequency. It was almost like an anomaly, and that's why I was curious what happens to these people after they go through all of these experiments with this type of technology. What happens to their DNA? And it's fascinating actually when you think about it. But I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten far enough in Sean's book to know to read that part yet. So I don't know. Maybe he talks about it.
I have Sean's book. I have to get. Yeah, I actually haven't gotten that far, and he's gonna shoot me if he hears. But yeah, I need to finish it.
Well, it's like because it's so big and the print is tiny, and it's like, oh my gosh.
He keeps emailing me. Did you finish it yet? Did you finish the book yet? Like,
well, he said he's got part 2 coming out soon.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, but I've had it since 2000. I've had it for 2 years.
Okay, I don't feel bad.
It's been sitting here. No, don't feel bad. and I don't know when I would have picked it up, because usually for my light reading, I carry a small mystery novel around with me when I'm having dinner or lunch or whatever. And Mark was just raving about it. I thought, well, I guess I better pick it up and start reading it. And it's great. It's a great read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I have a hard time reading thick books, though. That's just me. That's my problem. Unless it's like all science or something. But if it's like a book, like a story, I have a hard time with that.
Well, it's a story, but then, it's probably, because that's why I think some people kind of question mark stuff sometimes, because the adventure part sounds like it comes out of is a fictional, and then he interweaves it all with the science and the history. So sometimes I, fast forward through those parts and just get to the adventure. But so it reminds me, like, Sean is probably kind of the reverse, because he doesn't want to reveal his sources. I go, so Sean, like, who'd you get this information from? I can't tell you. Like, crap.
Yeah, nobody can talk.
And some of the authors, they've got very credible, real information, but they cloak it in fiction so that people will buy it.
Yeah, it's easier to digest for the masses, I suspect. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and people have asked me, well, why don't you just publish your stuff as fiction? I go, well, because I keep telling everybody it's not.
Well, and the thing is, everybody has like, she starts talking reptiles. I understand that this is a very expansive conversation we're having, but literally, right. What I wish we would have, this is what I hope for, a galactic museum. We need a galactic museum.
Okay, there is one.
Where?
In England. There's a guy there. When I go up to the Probe Conference, which is near Blackpool, which, for people here, you would equate that almost like with Coney Island or Atlantic City or whatever, because it's what do I want to say? It's very, very, very touristy, but it's I don't know. It's like maybe what I would have gone to as a kid. A lot of like neon light type stuff, and they had this wonderful light festival where they put all these light displays across the road and stuff. And it's called the Blackpool Lights or something. I forget. It's a big festival in August or September there. Anyway, it's pretty cool. But there's an amusement park there, and there's lots of places for tourists, lots of hotels, and you can buy rock candy and junk food, and it's kind of like going to a beach. It's just like a beach town. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because this guy, very knowledgeable guy, David Boyle, and he's got this museum, and it is cram-packed with so much information about different species and about science and about different places and just about so much stuff and history and galactic history and like I don't know if he's talking about some kind of federation where there's different species sitting around talking and meeting together, sort of, but he just crammed so much in, so it's like it was overwhelming for me, and I was there. You could be there for hours. But he's got like murals on the walls, and I think he used to be involved with the BBC because he's got a lot of props and stuff from Doctor Who and different things. So I think he used to be involved at some level with BBC, and maybe their props or their model making, whatever. But his wealth of knowledge is amazing, and he's always very nice and supportive, and towards me and respectful, and has sent Mark books and things like that, and so there is a museum. You just have to go to England to see it.
I'll have to take a trip over there and check it out.
Yeah,
sure.
You could be there for hours, and this guy he's a talker. So, and he loves to explain it all. It's like, wow,
how fun. Well, it sounds like a nice day in the park, in the Universal Park, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Cute. So about Mark now, when he does his traveling in space, or when he did traveling in space, did he use some kind of a suit, or was he ever immersed in some sort of a liquid oxygen or anything like that? Any hibernation?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I don't know much about his U.S. military missions. I have seen a picture of him in a U.S. military spacesuit. Just like the astronauts wear. I'm not allowed to show that publicly anymore because I'm not allowed to. So I'm sure he just I don't know. I'm sure he wears some kind of spacesuit. I don't think he has to get in any liquid oxygen to be in space. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if he just walks into Minerva and she adapts the environment for him. I know when he was in the Vesta report, very Star Trek sounding, because he said, you had to wear the heavy clunky boots to be in anti-gravity, so you weren't floating around. And so I know they had spacesuits, and I know they had the heavy boots, that kind of thing. Now, the other, you talk about the liquid oxygen. He has been in craft that belongs to oceanic species, So just like the movie Abyss, when the humans had to like swallow that stuff,
liquid oxygen, yeah.
Okay, he's had to do that, and it's weird, but you get used to it apparently. But it's like, oh, now the movie Abyss makes sense.
Yeah.
So which one of your species friends are like the creatures in Abyss?
Interesting. So what are the oceanic species? What do they look like?
Well, there are different species. So there is an interdimensional species. It's more of an energy species that I'm sure is much like that cool species that we did see in the movie Abyss, where she kind of lights herself up, but they don't really have a physical-looking body. So that sounds really cool. But to come on Earth, they have to reanimate a body of a recently drowned mammal. So when Mark has seen a particular, a little girl that he met, she was young at the time, because he was 7 or 8, and she had to take on the body of like a little girl who had just drowned. Now, when she was older and he ran into her again, she had an adult body. So they just have to take on the body of something that's drowned recently. And that's kind of weird and a difficult process, but they do it, and I don't know that they do it all the time. There are other species. I'm sure I think there's a reptilian type species that is, an oceanic, because he mentioned them in a little conference that happened here in the Bay Area in 1970. Yeah, the year after we went to the moon publicly. There are other species that came from space that have made bases in the ocean. So now I'm trying to glean from the talks I've given. There's some species that can take on the shape of a dolphin. So, and I think the one I talk about that takes on drowned bodies, like if they're in the water and stuff, they'll take on pretty much whatever your fantasy wants. So if you want to see a mermaid, they're going to look like a mermaid. And if you want to see a dolphin, maybe they'll look like a dolphin. But there are other species who probably look like dolphins all the time. And there's other species who are big squids.
Oh, interesting.
Big squids. So sometimes, I kind of laugh because we've heard stories in the last, we'll just say 10 years, of really giant squids being seen. And it's like, oh, maybe they're not squids. Maybe they're not, maybe they're not just a squid. And there's an octopus-looking species that sound, when I describe them in my talk, they sound like a normal octopus to me, just a marine creature, but they're basically an alien creature, but they look like an octopus.
That's interesting. So Mark has been to the underwater bases, right?
He's never gone into any detail about any of them. I know there's one near Catalina. That's about all I know. I couldn't tell you, where and he does mention, and I just don't, he doesn't mention necessarily locations, but he's mentioned like certain types of areas where, I think it's the Nereids, the ones that take on the bodies of drowned victims, like where they might live versus maybe some that might like to live closer to the surface of the ocean, or surface. There's another kind, and I think it might be the squid kind, or a lobster-looking thing, maybe. Yeah, there is a kind that kind of looks like a lobster, but when they come on land, they've got a suit that almost makes them look like a crab. So it's like he was calling her initials are like bikini. I don't know what that stands for. It's like bikini, and then there's a number he's friends with. But to come on land, it's almost like they're in a bio suit that makes them look like they're a crab walking around. And it's I don't know if it's metal or what, but a lot of these species have to have a bio suit to come up on land. But he's never really said, okay, their base is like 100 miles out and this far down. No, he won't. I'm sure he knows, but he won't.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. So was his craft capable of navigating through the ocean and opening up an anomaly portal through the sea and actually exiting out through the ocean?
The Minerva?
Yeah.
He's never mentioned her going into the ocean.
Okay.
So that's a good question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
well, what about other crafts?
Ocean. Oh, wait, I'm taking notes.
Yes, please take notes. I'm going to remind you.
Pardon?
No, go ahead.
Taking notes. He has flown. I mean, he's commanded one of the ships that were used to be in our Deep Space Fleet. I'm not sure if it was destroyed or not. He has flown Raptor short-range interceptors. He's been trained by the Raptors for their elite military. So I know he's flown some of their craft, like their bigger craft, or been on their crew or whatever. And he's flown all kinds of our own craft, secret or not secret. Because there was a guy that I met recently, and I was saying, my husband used to fly all kinds of interesting stuff. So I know he's flown like just the human military. He's flown Phantoms, and he's flown the Aurora. He's flown SR-71s. He's flown, and I get the numbers and the initials wrong, but the YFK-12 or something that sounds like that. And then there's another one that's way more secret than that Michael Schratt talks about, and I know Mark's flown it. He just doesn't talk about it. But they also, there's a wonderful museum it was Las Vegas. So Area 51 Museum and like the Nuclear Testing Site Museum. And they had some pictures of that stuff. So he's flown some amazing human military craft and non-human craft.
Yeah, that's awesome. How fun! That sounds like a great career, if you ask me.
Yeah,
until he got
thrown in jail. He can fly anything. He's flown, helicopters.
So how do the MyLabs at all tie into this at all with the type of species he's been around? I wouldn't think so, but what's your impression?
He's never really talked about being around our military that goes around and re-abducting people. I mean, he does mention like things, especially after Dulce and whatever. People do get mind washed or wiped or whatever it's called. The little, I don't know if it exactly looks like what they used in Men in Black, but they do have those little devices that will, mind wipe you. And you can be sure, and that a lot of these guys who are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and the Middle East, they've seen some horrific things, and they can't talk about it, and a lot of them probably choose to have their minds wiped. And that's a horrific process in itself. So, probably a lot of guys with post-traumatic stress syndrome, maybe they've had their minds wiped from the horrors that they've seen there, because it's not all human enemies that we're fighting over there.
Yeah, highly possible.
And it was like that when we went to Afghanistan, and Iraq. It's not all human.
And they never talk about things like that. But yeah, you're dealing with a multidimensional perspective instead of just this linear world that everybody's seeing through regular television.
Yeah, and because there are gates over there, and negative or less than friendly. Very hostile alien species are coming through those gates and working with the human terrorists that are over in that part of the world.
You're talking Stargates?
Yeah, Stargates, okay. Dimensional gates, Stargates, portals, whatever you want to call them. There's a large number of them over in the Central Asia, Caucasus Mountains, that whole range that goes like from Iran down to Pakistan and India. Lots of gates, lots of nasty things coming through. Refugees come down from the mountains and talk about monsters. Yeah. And the Kurds, and I think the report that he wrote about, I think it was about Iran and stuff going on there and the big gate that's there. The Kurds aren't necessarily fighting Turkish. They're not just fighting the Turks or whoever they were fighting a few years back, and they're definitely they're seeing nasty aliens. I know they are.
What about giants?
Yeah, there's giants there too. I have a great quote that I give in one of my talks about them coming down and talking to reporters or talking to other military people. I think at least one of them talked to some reporters, like, because whole villages of people are disappearing, or the giants or the monsters will be coming into their villages and taking the sheep and the women and children, and just, coming in and invading villages.
How are they disappearing?
Because they get scooped up or eaten or taken away.
So it's not a particle beam weapon?
No, they're just coming in and getting them. And, you know, it's like, I'm sure that the reptoids, you know, and no, I haven't been there. I am not working with our military. I don't remote view, so I can't see any of this. But I am sure that the reptoids who are working with the terrorists have, you know, regular weapons, or maybe they have some really cool, weird weapons. But, you know, they also eat people. You know, and the poor Kurds and Christians and people who are hoping and waiting for human people to come help them, you know, they're getting slaughtered, and it isn't by guns, I'm sure. A lot of them are probably just getting eaten.
Well, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, and at this point in the continuum, I think anything goes. Like I said, I think there's a huge rift. There's something happening with our continuum that's completely opening up all these different areas, you know.
Yeah, and, you know, if you look at, because I remember a while back, one of my friends in England said, you know, Ebola is going to hit the United States, like, in August. It's like, what? And this was before I even heard about the Ebola thing on the news. And it's like, well, crap, it's here. And I know they're taking some precautions at the airports and stuff, but it's like Mark said, well, just don't let anybody come here if they've been to Africa.
That's kind of like a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, and again, and no offense, it's like I don't have anything against people going to Africa to visit or whatever, but it's like, just don't have any travel between there and here right now.
Yeah, it's kind of like common sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you would think, but there's still traveling going on.
I know, I just don't get it. Honestly, I don't. Yeah, people are strange.
You're not going to survive, I'm sure. It's like there's going to be very few survivors, and if it just gets loose here, you know, we're toast.
Well, it's sabotage 101. I see a Trojan horse, you know, in full speed ahead. You know, I'm like, hold on to your butts here in the United States because we're in for a hell of a ride. I'm looking for my gate. I'm looking for my Stargate. I want out of here. My dog and my cat, we're going to another planet. That's it.
I know. Well, I joke around with Mark. It's like, you know, if something happens to you, your raptor friends better come get me and take me somewhere safe.
No kidding.
You know, and we'll scoop up the grandchildren on the way and tell them, come on, we're going. We're going to go for an adventure. And,
better than,
let's go.
Yeah,
you know, I don't necessarily want it to be off planet because I'm sure they have some hidey holes where they can keep me safe. But if it has to be, so be it, you know, because, you know, I don't want to stand here trying to shoot something that I know is going to walk right through my gun. It's like, you know, they're going to grab my gun and eat me.
You know, that's what I keep telling people. They're all investing in guns and all, and I think that's fine for home defense, but at some point the guns won't work. And that won't work for Homeland Security either, by the way. None of their primordial weapons are going to function.
Yeah.
And I know that's coming.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, you know, Mark's been around the Raptors for a long time, so he knows some of the cool toys and weapons that they have, and they're so much better than what we have. But he describes certain, you know, like, I don't know, different grenades or something that they have, or some weird, like a grenade type thing, and it's like, it creates a small crater. It's like, wow, and things just kind of vaporize. It's like, oh my gosh, really? Yeah, I was like, really?
Look at cool toys.
No, I know.
Great. How did Mark get recruited for this?
Well, he grew up in it.
So
his dad was involved with it. His grandpas were both involved with it. And, you know, it's funny because he had said, well, early on I thought I'd want to go to college and, like, become a police officer. I go, well, I hope you changed your mind. But I don't think, and he wanted to be a teacher because he had a teaching credentials, and he was teaching like some summer school and different things, and he's taught college level courses at the prisons, but it was just natural. It's like you didn't grow up with your dad, and you didn't grow up going into top secret meetings and bases and not just kind of do this.
He was groomed for sure.
He was groomed, and they were constantly testing him because they knew he's over the top brilliant, and they just knew that, so they were constantly testing him. And, you know, I've said before, he was working at Lockheed and were on secret projects when he was in high school, you know, and earning really good money. And so he was useful from a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
So,
exactly.
You know, it's just natural. And you know, he's an adrenaline junkie, so why wouldn't he go and do this stuff? Because, like, you know, you get to fly cool things.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you get to be in cool naval vessels and he loves to go fast, so he can fly fast things, he can drive fast boats, he can drive fast cars, So, and he's kind of like a Viking. If he had his way, he'd go off to Valhalla with a sword in his hand. So it's really a shame that he is like where he is, because if he dies in prison, it's like, it is like that is the last place he wants to die.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like I said before, I mean, he's been in there for a long time. I think they should let him out, but it's a strange world we live in. I swear, it's just so dysfunctional. And I have heard stories of people who've been compromised, not necessarily compromised, but set up, to that extent. Either they're in prison one way or another, frequency fed, or, they do the other prisons too, the psychotronic prisons that they put people in. So, pick your poison at this point, unfortunately. Exactly. But I applaud you for all the work you're doing to represent him while he's in there. I think it's fabulous that you're giving us this information. And I know it's a lot for everybody to digest, but honestly, I mean, this world is not what you think it is. And it may seem really strange, but man, there's stuff out there that we don't know about that a lot of people don't understand. And so many races and so many species that we haven't interacted with yet. So it's really...
Yeah, and what I'm really enjoying about what I'm doing lately is because it's like the first few years he sent me all these reports about really violent missions. It's like, ew, and he almost died in so many of them. It's like, ew, and I'd cry at the end because it's like, oh my gosh, okay, how many times did you almost die? And now lately, he's been writing about these interstellar treaty conferences and again the logistics of how you deal with all these species and the treaty process and what they were discussing and just the science. It's a lot to wade through, but if you just look at that and the sociology of being around different species, that is so fascinating, and I love giving. And those are very positive. I mean, I do have to talk about the less, the non-friendly species, but that's just, not all humans are very friendly. So it's just part of talking about all of them. And I like that. And I like sharing the history, and, it's all just about educating.
Exactly. Opening people's minds. Yep. You don't have to digest it all in 1 minute, but you know what? It's good to have all this information because one day, may not be on this dimension, but it might be on another one that they'll experience some things that might be close to what you're talking about. So it's very fascinating nonetheless. And now I'd like to ask you if you think that the Black Space Program has an artificial intelligence that's pretty much running the show right now and has pretty much eliminated the humanoid and actually has a hybridization of machines.
Oh, I don't know that.
Okay.
I would like to think there's still some humans out there flying the ships. Mm-hmm. But that does open up the topic that, I mean, there are species out there that are artificial intelligences. Mm-hmm. There are actual species from out in space that are robotic or, some kind of artificial intelligence. And he gets into that a bit. So there's another report that he's been writing. He started writing it kind of for fun. But in December of 1972, Prince Naga Raptor was having a winter vacation at a castle in Scotland, and he had invited, he had a bunch of his raptor harem, and he had several friendly species that weren't raptors come and join him for this winter, Yule. They didn't celebrate Christmas, but Yule and winter and all that time. And Mark was there for a couple of weeks because he was in and out of a couple of missions, but his human partner, Titania from England, was there with their 2-year-old. And so she got to be there for a month being around the raptors and these other species. And so but the report also talks about an artificial intelligence species that was hanging out at a former secret base up in Scotland in one of the little islands or whatever. And so it's fascinating. And he's talked about artificial intelligence species before, like when he was in England as a little kid at the conference. There was remember the movie Batteries Not Included? Mm-hmm. Okay, the little things that were flying around all the time?
Yeah.
I need to re-rent this movie. Something like that. He nicknamed it. It's called Flyer, but it's like one of those little things that was flying around all the time. But it is an AI alien species, And what is so cool is they might start out small, but they get bigger because they like to add parts to themselves. But like this flyer guy was around Mark for several years, and I don't know where he is now, but it's really cool because they're not. It's not like they set down legs or whatever. And I think I have a drawing or it looks like a magazine, but it could have been from a report, but I have a cool picture of it. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because it's different colors, like black and white and red, and it's got like little things that almost like kind of antenna looking things that come out of it. And it's not just all round and shiny. It's pretty cool looking, but there are different species out there who are AIs. Mm-hmm. And, but I don't think they've taken over. They're running our deep space fleet or Black Ops.
Yeah, I would say that's more of the manufactured artificial intelligence from an array system that we've created.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just curious if he had been around artificial intelligence. That's fascinating. And
he has. I haven't, but
yeah. Well, it's incredible. It's just boy, you need to be writing and writing and writing. That's all there is to it.
Well, fortunately, I'm going to put another book together of my talks because that's a really good overview of the general gist of everything we talk about. And I know people keep saying, I need to write my own book, and I will. And I don't know whether it will be that and then more or whatever. People want to hear my side of the story and how I got involved and how I went from just being a bookkeeper to be somebody who talks about this stuff all the time and loves it. Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, my vision is to retire as a bookkeeper at least by the time I'm 70. It's like I really don't want to do this for 10 more years, but if I have to, I will. But, I would rather in my much more golden years be doing the UFO alien education stuff full time because that really rocks my world.
Absolutely. How did you meet Mark?
I met him through a former roommate of mine whose husband is in prison.
Oh, geez.
And she came home one day and said, I met this really smart guy. He's a friend of my husband, blah, blah, blah. He was visiting with his mom. I go, smart. Okay, there's a new concept for me and a boyfriend. And so we started writing, and then a couple months later we met in person, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Basically, we courted for 5 years and got married. We've been married for 12 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's very cool, and I really miss not seeing him today, but it is really cool that we sit and we talk for hours, and he's taught me. I would have never gotten into, caring at all about UFOs had he not said, by the way,
it's interesting how life works, isn't it? Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten into this either had I not been pulled into that covert program in 2004.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
I know. It's like, I was just going along being a bookkeeper.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't sign up for this, but somebody signed me up instead.
I know. And there's days when it's like, really? What now?
Exactly. Well, you've done a fabulous job anchoring that energy over there. And let me ask you real quick about Hamilton Air Force Base. Now, from what you were talking about, it sounded like they were doing something similar over there as they were at Montauk. Is that correct?
In a way, yes, but the similarity, there's two things. The similarity with Montauk is that both of the bases had a squad of U.S. military flying saucers.
Okay.
The other thing about Montauk, which probably more people know about, like with the time travel stuff and the portal thing, that was connected to Letterman Hospital at the Presidio. Right. Because it definitely had a weird science wing, where that was like the other end of the what was going on at Montauk, and they finally shut it down. And I got a lot of cool pictures of what after it had been closed, but before they tore it down, because now it's all offices and George Lucas stuff and
George
whatever.
Lucas?
Well, George Lucas built a facility there in part of the Presidio, but definitely right over the site where the Letterman Hospital was.
That's weird.
Yeah, but it's what is weird too is, George was connected and he knew
he
stuff.
1138. Hello.
He knew stuff, and but what I remember in my early years with Mark, he said, well, why don't you go over to Letterman Hospital, take my mom, take some pictures, because they're going to, they've closed it and they're going to tear it down. It's like, okay, whatever, one of your outings. And so I went and we walked around and took pictures, but there's vents coming up out of the grass. So there was underground stuff there. Mm-hmm. And there was a particular underground facility there that was, pretty nasty energy-wise. So
I can only imagine.
And a lot of remote viewing went on there, and a lot of weird experiments. And like I said, it was like the other end of whatever was going on at Montauk, because I know something really nasty happened there, and it might have been in the early 80s, and that's probably why they decided to shut it down, because something nasty that maybe they almost couldn't contain.
Are you talking about Montauk?
I think something came through Montauk and was coming to Letterman, and they had to it was.
Oh, interesting. So there might have been a point A to point B. You think?
Yeah, it might have been trying. Yeah.
Sounds like
I don't have all the details, but I know it definitely was at Montauk, and it might have been wanting to come to Letterman. But
let me ask you real quick then: were they syncing up their machines, their devices from one location to the other, as a portal?
They could have been. Again, he doesn't talk a lot about that.
Okay, I bet you they were. That's my theory.
Yeah. And I know in the report that he edited about the Dulce stuff, it mentions a little bit about Letterman Hospital and what was going on there.
And you say they closed down, what was it, 1969 to 1972? Is that when the bases were closed?
Well, that was when Hamilton was closed. Okay. Letterman was probably still open, definitely open in the 70s.
Did they ever open it back up after they closed it down, or no? For
which one?
For Hamilton? Hamilton?
Oh, no, Hamilton closed, and now it's the Coast Guard uses one hangar because they do their hazmat cleanup rescue operations out of one hangar there. And there's some Coast Guard housing, personnel that are housed there. But most of what used to be the Air Force Base is all they've turned hangars into different offices and a lot of housing, just, normal people housing. Mm-hmm. The office building where his dad had an office, I think it's now in storage facility, basically. From the outside, it still looks like an office building, but I think it's a storage facility, and part of it in that area is maybe senior apartments or something. The hangar where he used to have his stuff, at one time Disney was thinking about having a facility there, but somebody else is in there now, so I don't think Disney I think that got canned, but there's something else in there now. And so they finally fixed it up. Yeah, wow. And the whole place because they're turning it in, the whole runway area it's being turned into a wetlands restoration project, and it's a perfect way to cover up where the flying saucers would have come out of. Yeah,
no kidding. But there must be some kind of a parallel.
They were stored underground, and the hangars were like I imagine much like on an aircraft carrier where the elevators just come from the lower belly of the aircraft carrier and the airplanes come up. The flying saucers were mostly stored in underground, places along Hamilton. He's told me, this road between, it's right near the flight line. But the one story he tells me about when his dad appeared in his flying saucer, he was coming out of his hangar, but most of them were stored underground.
That's fascinating. And you just can't make this stuff up. I'm sorry.
No.
It's wild. You know what?
He's got a vivid imagination and he writes great fiction, but this is just, weirder than fiction.
It's really fascinating. Now, I know you made mention of a first UFO seen or sighted in 1896. Was it over San Francisco?
Yeah, and that is documented, and it's been in Fate magazine too, but it is documented. You can find it on the internet. So what happened, Mark's, his grandpa Taylor they were using a Tesla engine, I believe, on that. So his grandpa Taylor was on at least maybe the maiden voyage or one of the test flights. He finally got off in Iowa or somewhere before it crashed, so thankfully. But they were seeing it all over the Bay Area as they were, testing it and flying around. And Mark's great uncles or his mom's great uncles or somebody, his other Taylor ancestors on his mom's side of the family, who, there's a state park named after one of them here. But he said you used to be able to see, what were they? anyway, some kind of docking thing, some structures that would help, like, to dock the airship or whatever. There used to be remnants of these things, and I've never been able to find them, so they've probably been torn down. But, yeah, apparently back in 1896. And then after that, there were sightings of weird airships, like over in England and Europe and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And you know what? We're getting ready to run out of time here pretty soon. I can't believe it, Joanne. And you have to come back, because I have so many other questions. This has been incredible, and I want to thank you so much. And before we close this off here, I want to make sure everybody knows how to get in touch with you, and also let's give them a rundown as far as what they can access and how they can get your books coming up.
So the website is edhca.org for Earth Defense Headquarters, California. And there's a whole product page of all these different products. I sell them by paper, or I can send them to you by Dropbox if you just want the PDF, and that saves you on postage. My email is on my website. I'm happy to take questions. That's fine. I have a Facebook page for Earth Defense Headquarters, and I'm trying to improve my social networking skills. So I'm like emailing all these people saying, please like my Facebook page. So
like your Facebook page. What's the name of it again?
Well, it's Earth Defense Headquarters, so they should be able to find it just from that, or if they typed in my name, Joanne Richards, no E, 2 words with Joanne, then I have a side page for Earth Defense Headquarters, so they can click on that too. So, so there's lots of ways to get a hold of me, and there's lots of reports about different things, and he's constantly writing, so there's new stuff coming out.
Great. And are you going to be speaking anywhere soon?
I wish. I'm going to be a special guest at Lori and Fenton's UFO con in, is it March now or May or something? So, in the spring is when it's supposed to be.
Nice.
I'm going back to England in a year to speak there again.
Nice.
They'll have me back whenever I can go, so that'll be cool. I'm putting the vibe out there. I would love to speak more and more and more. I'd love for people to bring me.
Oh, and you need to.
And I can't fly on my dime, and I can't put myself up. It's just like I'm getting a lot more orders, so there's a lot more support coming in, which is great. But I can't afford to fly around and go to every conference. But I'm going to make a very big effort to go to the UFO Congress, whether I'm just there or whether I have a table, because I'd love to have a table there, and then I'd be hanging out.
Oh, absolutely. You need to be a speaker there, too. We need to get you in over there for sure. Well, I want to thank,
love to be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you again for being here on tonight. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It's been awesome. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. I hope you appreciated this information, and everybody in the chat. And stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecki coming up next to sell you on into the night, as they always do from down under. And I think that's about it, but we've got about 1 minute. Anything you want to add before we close this off?
No, just thank you for listening, and feel free to contact me. And if you know of a conference where you live, get me there.
Excellent. Give Mark my best. And would you do me a favor and ask him those questions for me?
I will. I wrote them all down, and I will definitely ask him.
Cool. And so I'll make sure you come back and we can talk about more, because there's so much more I haven't even gotten to talk to you about.
I know. Thank you so much, Solaris.
It's my pleasure here. And we're probably got about a minute. I can never tell because this thing jumps in a second here. But let me ask you real quick. Was it Ellis Loyd Richards, was his name the Dutchman?
Yes, that was his father. His father was Junior, and it was also his grandfather's name, but his father's nickname is the Dutchman.
Okay, where did he get that from?
Probably because his ancestry from Germany, some of them went up to the Netherlands and stuff, so he has Dutch ancestry, so I'm just assuming it's that connection.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was my dog's name when I was a kid growing up.
Really?
Yeah. He's a German Shepherd.
Yeah, but apparently, a lot of people have heard of him, and the name is out there. And a lot of people, I've gone to some of these conferences where the young men still know my husband's reputation. So.
Awesome. We'll give him our best, everybody.
I will.
And that's my poor little thing. I feel sorry for him over there in that crazy-ass world. But, you never know what's going to happen from day to day. That's for darn sure.
Right.
And it could go in another direction overnight simultaneously. Do you ever see an intervention?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to run you over there. Do you see an intervention of any kind, any type of positive intervention on behalf of these other species?
Well, the Raptor friends would love to get him out, but it wouldn't be positive and it would be messy and he'd have to leave.
Mm-hmm. What about on a global scale for like everybody? What about just kind of getting rid of all this weirdness on this world?
I haven't really talked to him about if that's going to happen, so I don't know.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask you on that one for sure.
That would be good. But, I believe in manifestations and about, thoughts creating what we want, even with just one person at a time. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and awakening people too to the highest level of consciousness, which also completely changes. Yeah, it changes the dynamic. So I don't even think we need the Montauk stuff anymore. We can literally just do it through consciousness and intent alone.
Oh yeah, and you can do so much with putting the intention out there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, we can. Yeah. So when again can we look forward to these books being released?
My goal is by the end of the year, definitely by the first part of the year, because I know that Vesta, the editor who has it now, she said she'll be done with it by the end of this month, and then I'm going full bore, and Mark keeps saying he's almost done with the Africa thing. So
sweet, perfect. Okay, well, thank you again, Joanne, and thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.